Like what I learned and what I took into eWebinar is I would rather have a business where many, many, many customers have tiny pieces of the pie. So losing one doesn't hurt. I'm at no one's beck and call. Nobody has any custom features. They can submit feedback, but we don't do custom anything for anyone. And I just learned from a decade of doing this that I never want another enterprise SaaS company. Like there's no amount of money that you can pay me right now for me to lose my lifestyle. That's what it is. My lifestyle was being compromised because my price point was high. Welcome to ProfitLed Season 2, our Journey to a Million, Episode 23. I'm Melissa Kwan, co-founder and CEO of eWebinar and your host. I'm here with my co-host, Todd Parmley, eWebinar's COO. Hey, Todd, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm still recovering from my surgery. I don't think people... Yeah. Did we talk about this last time? I think we did.
We did. Yeah. You were still in a sling, but now...
I was still in a sling. So, I still can't move my arm. And I don't think many people listen to ProfitLed hoping they'll see some skin, especially since it's mostly audio. But I'm going to show you my scar. It's super gnarly. Do you see that?
The weird thing sticking out from your shoulder, collarbone is gone. Yeah, so I just got back from a week-long trip in Colombia for our friend's 50th birthday in, I guess not Medellin, as they say, it's Medellin, if you're cool. Yeah, I don't know if you've been there. I guess a lot of North Americans go there, to escape winter. It's like the city of eternal springs. It's not my favorite, I gotta say. It's got I guess it's supposed to have a pretty good dining scene, but I'm a bit spoiled. So I don't think it was as good as I remembered it the first time. But we basically had this 50th birthday in the jungle. So it's 2 hours away from the city. So we just spent 4 days there. And that part was pretty cool because we booked out the whole resort and the kind of the gazebo or Maloka thing that we had the party in was a 15-minute hike up. So it's you have to spend effort to get there. Yeah, so that part was pretty cool. But I wonder how many people I'm going to piss off by saying I'm not a fan of Colombia.
Well, maybe. Yeah, it's fair. Nobody likes every place. Come on.
True. Well, okay. So in the last episode, we talked about the 5 wrong hires that cost us almost $500,000 and how those experiences changed the way we hire and fire. So today we're going to talk about something that is quite near and dear to my heart and something that I really believe in. And it's why we stayed away from and actually continue to stay away from enterprise. And I guess you're also from the enterprise world. So
sort of. Yeah, I'm from the enterprise world, but I never touched enterprise sales. I worked for
but you were the buyer.
Right. Yes, that's true. I was a buyer. That's how we met,
by the way.
That's right. You sold to me.
I sold to you. So in my last startup, Todd and I met because I was selling my software, Spacio, which is a real estate open house check-in software. I was selling it to the company that he was working for, and he was the champion for that product.
I pushed it through faster than any product I'd ever sold in that company. So I felt very strongly about it.
That never happens, but how did that happen?
I made a deal with marketing. I said, I'll do this for you if you do this for me.
Nice.
Yeah. I cut a deal.
So for people who don't for people who aren't super tapped into real estate, open houses are when selling agents host an event for 2 hours on the weekend. Anybody can walk in to look at the house, but when you walk in, they make you sign in on a piece of paper because that's lead gen. So Spacio, my last company, was the digital iPad version that also has an automatic follow up for the people who signed in. That when they sign in, their information is private because they're not writing it on a piece of paper and they can't scribble on purpose. And then all that also gets fed into a CRM kind of on the back end. But yeah, that's how we met. So I know a lot and I want to focus, an episode on this topic because so many people, I guess so many startups and consultants also think that if you sell to bigger companies, you're going to make more money. And I think in the simplest form, that statement is true, but in many ways that statement is not true. And we've tried our hardest at eWebinar to not go that route. And yeah, so just really want to dive in this episode on my own experience of spending 10 years selling to enterprise companies. And also previous to that, I worked for multiple companies. SAP was my last job where I was also in enterprise sales, even though it wasn't for my own company. So actually my expertise is that I was trained to sell enterprise, specifically on like complex sales cycles. So complex sales cycles just means that there are many decision makers. A lot of people have to come to the table, and you have to, I guess, work your way through a company in order to get something approved in the budget. So that's what we mean by like a complex sales cycle.
You're already kind of talking about it, but then this may go without saying, but what do you mean when you say enterprise? Like, what are you talking about specifically?
Yeah. So when I say like sell enterprise, I think one, it's a dollar amount. So it's usually it costs more per month. So I think anything like 10K a year and over would be considered an enterprise deal. And the reason for that is because anything under that, like it doesn't make sense to hire a salesperson, anything under that, to actually sell. Like, and because like these sales cycles take so long, like the founders maybe can get it started, but they're not going to get super far. Right. So 10K a year is like a little over 1,000 a month. And that's probably the lowest point, right? Like some of these enterprise deals, I mean, for SAP, for example, goes up to like hundreds of thousands or like even millions, right? But it's I think for a typical startup enterprise deal, you'd probably be looking at like 30 to 50K a year would be like a pretty good startup enterprise deal. When I say 10K, it's like really bare minimum. Other things that define enterprise are things that you can't sign up on your own because it requires some level of customization. So it's not uncommon for companies to, like software companies, to have like plan A, B, C, and then D is custom, call us. And then that's the one that they don't publish the price on because of the customizations, they can't publish the price. So that's quite normal. Usually because of customizations, it requires some level of custom onboarding because of the feature requirements, right? So for example, in my last company, my last company, Spacio, was an enterprise level SaaS. My first company, which I ran for 5 years, we built software for real estate developers. So each deal was different. It wasn't SaaS. We wanted it to be SaaS, but it turned out to be a custom apps company. But we still sold like big projects or bigger projects to each individual company. So each one needed customization. So what's an example of customization for onboarding? So in Spacio, we offered our software to a brokerage, a real estate brokerage. So say a brokerage has 1,000 real estate agents and everyone has to have access to that. You're not going to get 1,000 people to sign up on their own. If you do that, no one's going to use it. No one signs up. So as part of the onboarding, we have to connect with the user base of the brokerage so that every agent comes to work and they want to use the software. All they have to do is set a password and sign in. And then all of the listings, all the properties that they've listed under the company already shows up in their software. Because if they have to enter it, they're not going to do that. And then you don't get the renewal because no one's adopting the software. So the problem is every brokerage uses a different database. So even though, the software works the same, kind of the plumbing of it was a little bit different. So that's an example of, custom onboarding.
Yeah. And I can attest to that working in real estate tech for 20 years. Every real estate organization has a different data structure and a different way of sharing data. So I can only imagine that it was very unique for every single brokerage customer that you had.
And even out of real estate, I mean, lots of companies have like single sign-on, right? So some are like Google, or some are custom, because it's an old company, or some is, maybe they're using a solution, but it's just a little bit different, right? So that it requires some level of like hands-on onboarding. Usually because the deal size is bigger, it's not billed automatically on a credit card. So you need an invoicing department. So none of these companies want to have a credit card to expense, right? For some reason, the bigger the company, the less credit cards they have. I don't know why that's true. It's still true. But if you're paying, $5,000 a month or 10 grand a month, they want you to send an invoice to accounting with like net 30 days pay. And then no one ever pays in 30 days. So then you have to chase them, right? So back then, we had a rule that anything under 10K has to be on credit card. And then anything over would be billed manually. So that actually also sometimes would force people to pay annually instead of monthly because they just want to issue. Like, it's just easier for bigger companies to do that. So we've used that sometimes as like a closing mechanism, but that's a good indication that like this is an enterprise deal. So you like don't sign up on your own, you don't put in a credit card. And then it's usually also defined by bigger companies, because bigger companies have either it's requirements because of their software or the number of people or the way they want to use your software, or they have compliance needs, right? They have some sort of special needs that require your software to be customized to them, which means that they need a lot more attention. So either it's the salesperson, the founder of the company is small, or, it's an account manager. So I think that I think that defines, what an enterprise deal is, but definitely first is like a bigger price point.
Yeah. And from being on the other side, this is maybe a little anecdotal, but I think it's true for most companies. There is a price point or a budget point internally where if you spend more than X amount, you have to get authorization for the budget of that. And so the higher, that also slows the sales cycle because suddenly you hit a certain price and internally at the company, they have to go through this whole process to get the budget released.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had mentioned like previous to having my first two companies selling enterprise, I was the enterprise sales for other companies. So while I think I self-selected into selling to companies because I didn't know any better or different. Like I just thought that this is how things are sold in the world. And don't forget, I started my first company at 27. So I basically just took what I knew at the time and I applied it to my own product. So it wasn't like I was choosing between, self-serve or enterprise. Like I was just like, I build a product and how I go to market is I go and sell it. And that's why I'm a sales-led founder, or I was a sales-led founder, which, by the way, I had mentioned in the earlier episodes that this was a philosophy that I took into eWebinar, which actually didn't work. So maybe it worked for a minute. I think it's like that literally is founder-led sales. And sometimes the amount is big, but usually the amount is small, right? And you kind of work your way up. Even for Spacio, we started at a low price point, and as the company grew, as the product grew, we nudged the price up higher and higher. And then as we built credibility into the marketplace, we were able to close larger clients because the bigger companies have to see that you can serve the small, medium-sized companies first before they actually take a chance in you. So eventually we got there. But I read a lot about, product-like growth companies. The only way to maximize revenue or go another level up is to go upstream, is to go upmarket. Everyone's trying to move from product-led sales back to sales-led because that's how companies are crossing, 10 million, 20 million. But these are really big numbers, right? But I think a lot of smaller startups, maybe especially in the beginning when they're struggling a bit, they think that, hey, if I just close a big deal, then I can, cover my team or be profitable. So just want to talk a little bit more before we dive into, where the costs are for enterprise sales, what I personally learned, from running two companies for 10 years. So first, I think what people don't understand is with a bigger contract value just comes with a lot of babysitting. So what does that mean, right? If someone's paying you $100 a month, which is what they do for eWebinar, which is where they start, if they're like, hey, I want to get on a call with you, the answer is no. And this is what I say, I don't care how big your company is because you always start at $100. And my non-negotiables, I don't do sales calls. We don't have a sales team. And part of not doing the call is to train the customer because we don't have call support. So I don't even want to get them on the first call. Like, not like it's a big deal. I just don't want to do it because then they'll think they can get on a second call, right? But I can only do that because my amount is small and they don't expect it. Like, no one's offended at that point.
Right.
Right. And I just
Right.
straight up say, like, at our price point, like, we just don't do anything live. Like, I'm
Yeah.
happy to help you here. And if I need to, I'll send a video, but no one's offended.
Right. And
But
by
if
here, you
someone's
mean
about,
chat, just to be clear. Yeah.
or like email.
Email. Right.
If somebody's about to spend $5,000 a month on a product or a service, they need to know that there's someone on the other side, right? They need to know that if there's a problem, because that comes out of a budget that they are pushing for, that they need to get approved. So they are now responsible for that. So they need to know that if something breaks down, that you're going to be there. But part of building that confidence is knowing that throughout the sales cycle, that you're also going to be there. Because if you're not there in the sales cycle, then how can you be there when something breaks down? With the price point, right, comes complex, long sales cycles because many people have to be convinced that this is going to add value to the company. And then eventually it makes it to the CFO or the CEO to like sign off. But many people have to say, yes, this is really good. And then maybe it goes to the training team to say, yes, we think it's good and we're willing to train on it. Sometimes they say, I don't want to. And that's even happened for eWebinar at a low price point. Like the trainer saying, I'm already using this and I don't want to switch. You can buy it, but I'm not going to train on it. And then that breaks.
I mean, it's one of the big unknowns in any company is it has its own culture, has its own way of doing things. It has its own politics. Like even the fact that I did a deal to get this through, it's like, what am I? Some kind of like broker? No, I'm like the product. I'm product and their marketing. But we're like doing these sort of like trading deals internally. So you just never know what barrier is going to get thrown up that you have to overcome, if you can even overcome it.
But that's why the price point has to be high, right? Because if you're spending all this time nurturing people, convincing people, right, taking them out to dinner, being their friend, then the payoff has to be worth it in the end. And that's why it doesn't make sense to have salespeople running these cycles at like a couple $100 a month, right? Like, and then of course, with this, for lack of a better term, like higher maintenance customer, you then need high touch support, right? There's an expectation that there's an instant response. Like maybe not like immediate, but like within a few hours. Or if something breaks down, they're texting you. Like my companies were always small because we're bootstrapped. Like all of our customers had my cell phone number. Yeah. And if something goes wrong and like, hopefully something doesn't, like if something, and they would know how to manage that because they know it's like my cell phone. But if something really, like if someone's complaining, of course, like real estate agents love to complain, but if it's an issue, like they are texting me. And don't forget, like our product, like Spacio, was for open houses. So it was only used on Saturday and Sunday. So Saturday and Sunday, my phone would be like off the hook, right? Just like if something goes wrong or some agent's at a house and it doesn't load. Yeah, it was the worst. It was really, really bad. However, like going through that experience, I learned the product that I don't want to build, the type of business I don't want to build. And that's part of being an entrepreneur, right? Just this like process of elimination. But high touch support means that you have to be responsive. You have to have people to fix things right away because they're investing a lot in this. And, in the past, we never did this, but I had a lot of friends that did, where if big companies want 24-hour support, they would charge an extra, like say something like $70,000 a year extra. And they would hire two people like offshore to cover the 24 hours, but they would add that onto the contract. And some companies will do that. Yeah. So it also requires, usually, at least in my past life, because of the industry as well, like there was a big component to needing to sell in person. So in real estate, and I don't think real estate is like unique to this, but like there's a lot of conferences, events that you go to and just see each other, right? Like, now I think like with Zoom and everything, like it's good enough because people are working remote on their own timelines, especially after the pandemic. But events are coming back, and because the contract value is big, you almost have to like shake hands with that person once in person, build that friendship, see if you like each other. They have to see that you're friends with their friends, and their friends have to talk about you, like at those like, in the lobby or in those like after hours events at a conference. And then you're like in the circle. So once you're in the circle, then everything can happen digitally. But that was very, very prevalent in the industry that I was in. And I think other industries are like have their own events.
Yeah, I don't think it's
right?
that. I mean, I think like you said, it's changed a lot since the pandemic, but it's still a thing. There's no question.
Well, HubSpot, right, have their like once a year big event, and like Gainsight has their once a year big event, right? Whether it's for partners or vendors, like, and it's also like a place where all the vendors get to meet each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we got into companies because we were partnering with another vendor.
Right.
So if a company was switching CRMs and our software actually sat on top of CRMs pretty well, because if somebody signs into Spacio, that lead goes into a CRM. Anybody that is changing CRMs, we have a bigger chance of also closing them.
That's how we did it at when we purchased Spacio, is because we were just adopting this CRM for the first time that you guys partnered with. That was the big selling point.
And ironically, or maybe luckily, not ironically, the way that I got eWebinar off the ground was because I knew so many other software companies who were also vendors in the industry. And I knew that they had the issue of doing the training webinars over and over. So I think the first 50 customers that we had were all from my past life, like software companies that I knew before. And that's why we have like such a huge number of real estate startups and also brokerages using us. It's actually from my past life. But going to in-person events was, for me, like some people love it. For me, it was a drag because I don't live in the US. I mean, I was nomading already at the time. And a lot of these events happen like between January and March, kind of like kickoff in the year. And like between January and March, I was on a plane every 1 or 2 weeks, like just needing to like show my face and like make sure people knew I was there. And if we closed a big deal, we would go to these events and talk about it. And then, if you close a big deal, then they want you to go to that next event because then you want to meet the rest of the team. And of course you want to do that because you want to make sure, because you haven't rolled out yet. So then you want to make sure that they don't change their mind before they roll out. So there's just a lot of that, right? That comes with a price point. And I think the last piece was that I learned was, like, there was so many custom features that we needed to have just to make it work. And so the way that we did it in the past was like, not everything was custom. We were not a dev shop, but we had a software and there were certain pieces of it that were custom. So for example, like the agent roster was different, like for most companies, but also like where companies hosted the listing data of the properties. Like some people had it from, their own database. Some people had it from the multiple listing system, the MLS. So, every company, because they wanted to be different, wanted their sign-in form to look different. So we offered like kind of a skinning, like a branding to each company. So we had like 6 different skins that you can choose from, or you could submit a custom brand and we would implement that. And then, if you've ever been to an open house before, like on that form is not just like, what's your name, number, and email, right? It's like, do you have a mortgage company? Are you working with an agent? If yes, then it'll like ask you to fill in your agent name. Or do you currently rent or own? Because this form is for lead generation. It's for qualifying the people that are coming through. So some companies wanted, some questions to be to be mandatory, and some wanted it to be, removable by the agent. Some did not want it to be removable. So it wasn't like a big thing, but there were like little nuances that we had to build in order for us to close that deal. So in the end, it was just a lot to manage.
Yeah. And again, with like a higher price point, people expect that, right? They expect it. They're like, you need to, and that, I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience. It's hard to manage how to appease that without building a Frankenstein system where you're like basically at the beck and call of every request that you get. It's very, very challenging to do.
I mean, we tried in the past to standardize it as much as possible, also as part of training the customer, because we didn't want people to think we were building custom things for them. So one of the ways that we alleviated that was when they sign up, we basically say, which one is your branding option? 1 to 6. If they really push for custom, then we'll do it. But we give them like 6 things. Then we say, are there removable questions or not? So we tried to standardize those features as much as possible. But in the end, we were still managing different versions of it. And I know that there are companies that do much bigger customizations. We were just too small that we couldn't mention it or that we couldn't handle it. So, there were multiple times when people asked for like actual custom features. And I learned this from one of my sales coaches, like the answer is always yes. So you basically say, yes, we can do that. Let me find out how much it's going to cost. And I will come back to you.
I learned that trick from you too.
Yeah. So basically,
it's such a good one.
10 out of 10 times they'll be like, oh no, it's fine. Because people don't like no, right? If you say no, then they like, then they keep pushing, but you say yes, but let me find out how much it is. And then let you know, like nobody ever pays you for a custom feature. And I think one of the things that, I also learned having sold a company is that when you have a lot of custom features, your company is no longer fully SaaS. It's partly service. And some companies would charge more to manage those. And then, and that's, I guess, another key definition of like an enterprise company or an enterprise software is like one part is SaaS and one part is service. And some companies charge that separately. But in some cases, it actually lowers the valuation of your company because it's more to manage after someone takes over. It's not as much of like a greased wheel, right? It's not like people just sign up on their own. Like there is a managed part to it, which has just more cost. And then of course, like in the past, like our product was not on like just on the web. It was actually mostly on mobile devices. So it was like Android, iPad, iPhone, Android tablets, Android phones. And every time there was an OS upgrade, it was just a mess. Like we had to, every time we upgraded, we needed to do like 5-6 versions just to make sure they fit. And then as phones got bigger, there was like, it was hard to manage which version we go to because some of our tablet versions would end up on the phone, but then it was too small. So there was just so many things that were just not good about that. And then the other thing that I learned was naturally, if you close a lot of bigger deals, you have less deals, right? So less customers, but they take bigger pieces of the pie. And why is that a problem, right? So in the past, our biggest customer was 15% of our revenue. So we couldn't lose that. We couldn't lose that company. We were their slave. Like we would do anything that they wanted to do. Anytime they called, anytime they emailed, my heart would stop. Anytime we issued them an invoice, I'm like, when are they going to pay? Right. Like, and then of course they sat on it for like 60 days, 90 days. I'm like, hey, like, and you can't really shut them off because they're 15% of your revenue, so there's that also. And of course, like sometimes you lose customers for also things that you can't control. So because every customer has such a big contract value, losing a customer really hurts. And sometimes like losing that customer is like one person's salary. Yeah. So that's another reason why we try to push some of the bigger contracts into paying annual, is like just to lock them in and make sure we have time to close another deal if we lose a deal. Right. So, um, I guess what I've learned from like operating like that, like being at the beck and call of customers, managing multiple versions, always having to build, a little bit of custom feature, not really being fully SaaS, having to show up in person for 1/4 of the year, like having customers have my mobile number, right? Especially because, we're bootstrapped. I think this is a very unique thing to like a bootstrap company. But they would have the number to a salesperson, and I just happen to be the salesperson. So someone would have to manage that, right? And like what I learned from all of that and what I took into eWebinar is I would rather have a business where many, many, many customers have tiny pieces of the pie. So losing one doesn't hurt. I'm at no one's beck and call. Nobody has any custom features. They can submit feedback, but we don't do custom anything for anyone. And I just learned from a decade of doing this that I never want another enterprise SaaS company. Like there's no amount of money that you can pay me right now for me to lose my lifestyle, because that's what it is. My lifestyle was being compromised because my price point was high. And I don't think people think about that. They think, oh, if I close a bigger deal, I will have more money. But they don't think that price point of a product changes the way you operate your business and therefore changes your life along with it. So with eWebinar, like I didn't know I was going to build eWebinar. I just knew I wanted to build something. But one of my non-negotiables was I need a product that can be sold 100% through the internet. And the only way to do that is to keep the cost low so that everything is self-serve.
And just to build on one thing you said about the custom features, the thing that's different about having more customers, right, who do give feedback, because it's not like custom features means that when you get feedback, you start to hear feedback that comes from multiple customers, right? So it becomes much, much clearer what you need to do, where it's going to have the most impact across your user base, instead of being at the beck and call of the loudest, most kind of like the ones who are paying you the most, which really is a terrible place to be in. And it often leads to really bad software, honestly. So just switching gears a little bit, right? So talked about what enterprise is. At the beginning, you talked about how there's this belief that going up market is the path to more revenue. And on the surface, and honestly, like when not having a background in enterprise sales, right? When we were growing and we started having enterprise companies knock on the door, it was a surprise to me when you were like, no. And it was, I would have never known this. So like I would be in the shoes of the person who thought like, yes, obviously going up market, bigger companies, that's obviously the best path to more revenue. So why don't we talk about why that's not always the case?
Well, I think that sometimes it's path to more revenue, but it has to be a different product. And that's what most people don't understand, right? It's not like I can go and sell eWebinar as it is, just charge more because I know the company can afford it. So what am I offering that's different and unique from the one that everyone can sign up for? But that path also means a lot more cost, right? And costs sometimes come in like straight up like money. Like I need to spend money to hire someone to maybe build more features, handle more support. But cost is also time, right? As we talked about, like time to sale being the highest costs. And sure, like these companies that pay more, they're also stickier, but you also don't think about how much more support they actually need, right? So some example, so like, I guess just to sum that up is like, yes, it could be a path to more revenue, but you have to balance that out with like, what does it cost for me to get that revenue? And that's the thing that a lot of companies don't think about. So what are some examples of that cost, right? So for example, custom features. Customers will not pay for that. A lot of them won't. And I'm talking startups. I'm not talking like your Salesforce. Like maybe if you're big enough and you are doing something that's like heavy and meaningful enough, like maybe they will. But in the beginning, like, and when I say beginning, I don't mean like you're literally out of the gates. Like say like first 5 years. You want to close a customer, they need something, otherwise they don't sign, you're going to build it. If you need the money, if that is, this is the route that you're going, right? So that means potentially ongoing service for one-off customers. So more versions, more maintenance. And, we talked about like SSO is actually not really a custom feature, it's just something you have to do. But, other things could be branding, white labeling. It could be, they want a special data point in their enterprise dashboard that you have to build, connecting to their database, something, right? Something along the lines of that. Or, and then their database refreshes every, 7 days. So you have to build in something that does that, that doesn't overload your system. Right. So now you're like needing to remember like each one of these things. Other examples of costs are like the bigger the company, the more compliance requirements. So SOC 2 requirements requires you to not just be compliant, but get audited once a year. The audit takes 1 to 2 months. The compliance itself takes months to do, depending on where you're at. And then as things change, versions changes, whatever changes, that maintenance is ongoing. Like we didn't even explore that until we broke even. All right. So now we use Vanta for it. And like every day it's like, you've got all these things you have to address. But that's something to do. Depending on where your client is, there might be a GDPR requirement, like in Europe. And then for bigger companies, they might even require you to have financial audits, right? It just depends, right? So a lot of times, like it might not even be worthwhile for a startup to enter the sales cycle.
Yeah. I mean, I remember from our own like growth period, we started getting these requests from enterprise companies, right? Are you GDPR compliant? Are you SOC 2 compliant? And, I was, again, sort of surprised that you were saying no. And I think the thing to be careful of is like, if you've had no experience with this kind of thing, you really can't understand how complex it is. I certainly didn't, right? So, I mean, not having that experience is probably the biggest challenge because you don't know, you can't really know for sure how hard it's going to be. I mean, I didn't even have an answer for that. Talk to people who've done it if you haven't done it yourself, but it's much more complex than you think it's going to be. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And just to get SOC 2 compliant, we hired a consultant and an auditor. So that was like $10K collectively. It was probably 4 months of our time, our CTO's time away from building other things that are revenue generating. And then every quarter, I think we pay like 4 or 5K, like just to like for upkeep. Yeah. Just to maintain. Right. But we had to get to a place where that was worth it. But that's a real cost. And it's like real time. And you got to like change some of the way that things are built. Right. The other thing is like, you got to have salespeople to make those sales. If, the founder can start doing it, but eventually you will need a salesperson. And long sales cycles means that you're not going to see money in for a while. So you're not going to see the ROI on that person for a while. And the people who know how to sell enterprise and do it well are like the top 1% salespeople. So they are also the one that cost the most. Or you can't actually hire them. So you have to hire a second tier salesperson and make them into an enterprise salesperson. So then it's even slower for them to close the deal. So there's a trade-off, right? The difference between a mediocre salesperson and an incredible salesperson is actually huge. But the salary difference might be 100%. So that's why like your price also has to be a lot higher. And yeah, and to justify, and not all products can actually get up to that price. Like I don't think eWebinar can ever have that price to justify. Yeah. So yeah, and also like we talk about high touch customer support. Like you as the founder do not want to do customer support. Like me, David, and Todd did support for like the first like minimum 2 years of our lives in eWebinar, and it like this is why you have no hair.
Yeah, no, I know. I had no hair before, but like there's no hope of it ever growing back.
Yeah, like while like of course like founders, you know, as part of founder-led sales also, like you start off doing it. Like if you need high touch customer support, you need to hire someone.
Yeah, and you start with so much energy and hope and
yeah,
and
it
patience.
gets destroyed. Yeah, it gets destroyed very
and
quickly.
then there was a point where I was like, we gotta get out of customer support. We're gonna murder our customers.
I mean, I already did. I mean, I remember like I was like responding. David would be like, "Stop responding."
No, exactly. I'd be like, "Oh my god."
I'm like, "Cancel then. Go away." When you need high touch customer support, you need to hire people, and even if you outsource, it's still $2,000 to $3,000 at the low end. If you want to have someone a little bit more trained, then maybe like $3,000 to $5,000. And this is like outsourced people. Right. But like people who, you know, $5,000, you're getting to people who are actually like junior developers that can do like technical support. $2,000 to $3,000 are more like non-technical support, which is kind of the stuff we're doing. But you still need to invest in it. You need to build out a team. And this is because they want quick responses, right? If the people aren't paying a lot of money, you know, they might be okay like sitting on a ticket for a couple of days and they won't get angry. You know, and also like when I talk about in-person events, like, yeah, maybe going to the event is fun and you purchase the, you know, the ticket for $1,000, but travel expenses, right? Your flight there and back, your hotel, taking clients or prospects out for dinner, drinks, you're the vendor, you pay. Yeah, period. If that event requires you as a vendor to host a booth, the booth is going to cost you $5,000 to $10,000 minimum. Right. I was always the one that would show up with a tablecloth and an iPad. Like I didn't care. Like I had no money.
Oh my god, I love it.
Yeah, and then people would feel so bad for me.
Did you have a sign? Did you have your logo up?
I had eventually a custom tablecloth, and an iPad, but people would like feel sorry for me and they would like bring their candy bowl or like bring like stuff over to dress up my booth.
Oh my God,
but like I couldn't invest in it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't send anyone else there. So like if your product has a low price point, that in-person event does not pay off. It does not make sense. And for years, like I didn't buy tickets. I just lobby conned it. I just hung it in the lobby. And I would only do booth duty for the companies we had like partnerships with, right? So like a Berkshire Hathaway or whatever. So part of like being able to work with a company like that is they make you join their partner program. And in the contract, it says you have to be in the conference hall twice a year because that's how they fill the conference hall.
So I'd never heard the term, for those of you who hadn't heard it either, the term LobbyCon, which is I call it the art of stocking lobbies at conferences now.
Yeah, I did that. And then everyone always knows you don't have a ticket because you don't have a name badge.
Right.
So you just try to hide.
You're like, oh, I left it in the room, right?
Yeah. Just try to hide it.
Meanwhile, you're living in your car.
Yeah, or like some sponsors have like guest passes, and they would just feel bad for me, so they would just give it to me. I was so cheap that like, eventually I had one of those like stands, like I don't know what you call those, but it was like
an easel.
Yeah, it was like one of those things that it's like a roller thing.
Yeah.
And you couldn't really take that on the plane, so I would be so cheap to even put it in someone else's shipment and like send it back to their office and just have them take it with them the next time. Like I would use I would use Boomtown or something because they always have a container, and then I always found a way to hack it. But all of this is money.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's just like some of the costs, right? So just to kind of sum that up, like, you know, why is going enterprise a path to more costs, and why does it not always make sense? It's like custom features, hiring additional devs, managing those features, and sometimes it's changing those features because your OS no longer supports it. right? In our case, it was like a, an iOS upgrade, for example. Compliance requirements, potential financial audits, right? Which you might not be doing now, right? Someone else has to do that. Hiring salespeople that are expensive, not just normal salespeople who could close and run complex sales cycles. Hiring support team, responding quickly, just so nobody texts your phone. In-person events, conferences, especially the mandatory ones that you, in theory, have to go to. So the bigger the deal, the more attention you need to give, but also the more investment you need to make in your team and in your product. So I guess people have to figure out what is that enterprise product I can sell? And how much more value can I bring to an organization for me to charge a price point that actually makes sense?
Yeah. So there's some of our listeners who are sitting there thinking, yes, all of this sounds very hard, but my product is an enterprise product, right? It does have a high price point or whatever they're very much aware that moving up market for them is something that they either want or need to try. So for the people who are in those situations, what would you say, what should they consider before walking down that road?
Yeah, so I think there's two scenarios here. The topic of this podcast is why we don't go enterprise, right? So all the reasons we listed, me not wanting to change my lifestyle, and is actually the primary reason we don't go enterprise is because of lifestyle, because we are a lifestyle company. But for us to go enterprise, it would require going up market. But to your point, yes, there are companies that start off enterprise, and they would say, okay, I want to close my first 2 customers and then, build some capital and then, kind of grow from there. That's also dangerous because now your first customer, your second customer has 50% of the pie, right? And then you end up just kind of slaving away, right? For 2 customers. So there's 2 scenarios, but I guess the first thing I would consider is ask yourself why you want to go up market. So is it because I'll just speak to our scenario of right now having a self-serve. So right now everybody comes to our website, everybody can sign up. It's the exact same product. It's like a MailChimp, right? Everyone gets the same thing and there's 3 different plans. Do you want to go up market because you just want more money? Right? Or are you thinking that your product is just a better enterprise product because there is no audience for your product today? Right. So if the answer is, well, I just want to make more money quicker, then maybe
don't do it.
Maybe it's a better idea to ask yourself, have I exhausted my current market? Right. Maybe the effort and money is better spent on figuring out marketing or a better flywheel, better sales flywheel, better funnel. Right. It might be in theory, a quick path to more money, but now you're managing 2 products. Now you've got your self-serve product and you've got your custom product with 1 customer. And then all your dev time is going to customizations for the enterprise, for the enterprise product.
Yeah. And if you've never worked in an enterprise, catering to enterprise customers, I would say definitely speak to people who have, maybe people who've gone the same path and tried it, because I can't underestimate, just even from observing from my own experience, the complexity is so much greater than you could imagine until you're
listen to this podcast twice.
Yeah, listen to it twice. Right.
And
second times, reduce the speed to 50%.
And also I would ask yourself, can your product be sold as is? Have you, no, before you move into enterprise, right? Before you even go that route, really ask yourself, is your product good enough to be sold as is? Have you not tried hard enough? Because sometimes that is true, right? It feels like, oh, if I just close a deal for $50K, I'll be fine, right? But maybe your product can be sold as is and you can make $100K. You just haven't found that channel yet, right? So I would also ask, okay, have I exhausted my existing audience? Have I tried everything to get to that audience? Right. And if if I in fact go enterprise, how do I have to change my product and how would that affect my business? That's the biggest question, right? What are those customizations? What is that bigger product? And how does my business have to change? And how much time and cost will this change incur? Right. And even if I'm willing to make those product changes, are you prepared for what's to come? Right. The increased support, higher maintenance, bigger team. Bigger team also means bigger, like more management, less freedom. Right. Do you need to go in person? Do you need to do a lot more one-on-one sales calls, right? For people who aren't doing those right now, right? We do 0 sales calls, right? All of our demos are done through our site. They hop into eWebinar, they get a demo. The moment we sell enterprise, I'm going to have to hop on a call one-on-one with people to like enter them into that sales cycle, right? So are you prepared to change your lifestyle as well in order to get, in theory, that enhanced outcome?
And one thing I would add about things you should consider, which goes sort of back to what you were saying about have you exhausted your existing audience, is to talk to your customers, right? If you talk to your customers, you will find out from them what features maybe you could have built to attract new customers, or what opportunities there are for upselling that you didn't know about. Whatever those things are, there's a lot of opportunity to generate revenue from your existing customer base, either through upselling or for getting to them to the point where they are advocating for you to others, right? They become your biggest advocates out there in the world. So there's that as well, which is I'm sort of a fanatic about how your customers will tell you exactly what you need to do.
And I think a lot of companies that we read about, like product-led companies that do go up market, like they're already in the tens of millions of revenue. Like they're not doing this because they need a quick win, right? They're doing this because this is the path they have to go in order to get to the next category of revenue. Like they have completely exhausted everything, and maybe they want to IPO, maybe they want to raise more money, and that is the way, to make more money. I don't even think Slack went enterprise for a while, right? Like it all started with like product led and customer led.
Yeah. And it's like, if you're at that category, if you're ready for that, it means you already have an engine that's working. You're selling to non-enterprise customers efficiently, effectively. Your customer base is growing. So like you said, it's like opening up an entirely new channel for kind of growth and revenue up into the next category. So, is there anything else you want to cover about that? I think this might be a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap up as well. I'm glad we got that out there because I actually get that. I get this question quite a bit. So now I can just use this as my response.
Yeah, you can send them the link. So we talked about your experience, just to summarize. We talked about your experience selling enterprise and kind of what enterprise is to sort of set up the conversation. And then why going to a webinar you knew that you did not want to go that route. At least for us, why going up market was not going to be a path for revenue. And then at the end, we talked about, for those people who do, what should they think about first? So with all that in mind, what is your hot take for today?
My hot take is you don't need to go up market to win, at least not that soon. Enterprise is a lot of hassle, a lot of money. A lot of people aren't ready for it. They think they are, but they aren't. So if like us, you're listening and you did not start by selling to enterprise, like just exhaust your current market first with the product that you have. Hopefully you break even, take care of your team, take care of yourself. And then you can decide when you're ready to expand, like your product, your operation, and then use it kind of as an upsell. Like I want to just reiterate that it is not a way to a quick win, even if it seems like it, because there are sometimes customers that will come to you and say, "Oh, I'm willing to pay you $100K if you do this for me." Great, which seems like a lot of money, but it's really not. because you have to manage that. You're basically their personal development shop for the rest of your time with them. So really think about that. What is your hot take?
I mean, mine is pretty much the same. It's a little bit different, but it's like, if you don't have enterprise experience, you don't know what you're in for. You just don't know what you're in for. So if you are going to take that route, just do it with a lot of caution and research, think about it, and talk to people where it succeeded, talk to people where it failed. Whatever you can do not take that step lightly. And it's very tempting when someone comes along and offers you a check for $100,000, right? It's very hard to resist that. But the strings attached are chains sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I've got a small favor to ask. The only way ProfitLed grows is by word of mouth. So if you'll do us a favor and hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening or watching this podcast right now, it'd mean the world to us and help us continue to spend time making these episodes for you. Ping me on LinkedIn if there are particular topics you want us to get into this season. Send me any feedback you have on this podcast because I love hearing from you. My name is Melissa Kwan, last name spelled Kwan. To get notified of new episodes, join our mailing list by going to ProfitLed.fm. I promise to only share things you'll actually care about. Thanks for listening. Bye now.